thought, well, I'll turn the television on and see what's happening. And so I turned the television on, and before the picture formed, I could hear the announcer saying in an alarmed voice, "My God, he's been shot, he's been shot." And I thought, oh, now what? And with that, the picture became visible, and I could see that Ruby had just shot Oswald downtown as they were transferring him from the police to the county jail, with a large crowd of people around him as he was transferred, and Ruby had stepped out of the crowd and shot Oswald. With that, I said, well, I better go to Parkland. So I stepped to the foot of my stairway, called up to my wife. I said, I'm going to have to forego lunch because they just shot Oswald. And she called down and said, who is Oswald? I said, Oswald was the man they said shot President Kennedy. Oh, she said, well, we'll see you later. She was used to saying things like that to me. And I went, got my car, and drove out toward Parkland Hospital, which was about 15 minutes away. And as I was driving out there, I got about halfway there, and I saw Dr. Shires, my chief of surgery's car, coming toward me. And he had returned from Galveston, where he'd been at the meeting on the day the president was shot. So he stopped his car beside mine, and I stopped my car beside his, and we agreed that we both just found out that Oswald had been shot and taken to Parkland. So he turned his car around and went back toward Parkland, and I followed him, and we both arrived at the emergency room right after Oswald had arrived, and we got out of our cars, ran into the emergency room, and the nurse there motioned to trauma room 2 across the hall from trauma room 1, where the president had been 2 days before. She said, he's in there. And so we pushed the door to trauma room 2 open and looked inside and saw a beehive of activity around Oswald, who was lying on a gurney and looked like he had probably bled out just about. And they were pumping blood into him, getting him ready to go upstairs to the operating room for exploration of his wound. And what had happened to him that cost him his life, as he walked toward Ruby, and I think probably many of you have seen depictions of that on television and whatnot, as soon as he saw Ruby, as anybody would, he attempted to avoid the pistol pointed at him, and he turned his side so that the wound, instead of going straight through from the front to the back, and maybe causing far less injury than what happened, and survivable injury had it gone through from the front to the back, it went across the back of his abdomen and the side on the left, and came clear across his abdomen and buried itself in the soft tissues on the right side. In doing that, it injured both his aorta and his vena cava, which were his major blood vessels, of course, and usually that kind of wound is immediately fatal at the site of the wounding. But as luck would have it, the blood clot formed around those vessels in such a way that he didn't bleed out, and it was possible to get him to the operating room and explore him, which we did. Dr. Shires was the operating surgeon of record, and Dr. Perry and I, and Dr. Ron Jones, who's one of our residents, who now is the chief of surgery at Baylor Hospital in Dallas, we all operated on Oswald. And Dr. Shires explored him through a long midline abdominal wound. It was just about down to the area of the vessels that had been injured, so that aortic and cardiac clamps could be placed on the aorta and the vena cava. Just at that moment, Oswald also had a cardiac arrest. Dr. Perry and I dropped out of the surgery, and Dr. Perry made an incision in Oswald's left chest, and we massaged his heart, taking turns, Dr. Perry and I, for about 20 or 30 minutes. And initially it looked as if cardiac activity would return, and we could get the injury repaired. But it stopped again, and then we massaged some more, and it stopped again. Finally, he arrested and had to be declared dead. We couldn't get his heart started again. And with that, we went back outside the operating room to where Mr. Lovell, the deputy sheriff, or actually a police detective, who had been handcuffed to him as he was being let out of the jail when he was shot. He said, you know, he said, as soon as he was shot, I unlocked my handcuffs from him and got down over his body on all fours and put my face in Oswald's face. And I said, Mr. Lovell said, son, you're hurt real bad. Would you like to say anything to me now? And he said, with that, Oswald, who had his eyes closed until he said that to him, opened his eyes real wide and looked up at him for a long several moments, as if he was thinking whether he was going to say something or not. And then after those few moments, Mr. Lovell said Oswald shook his head like that very emphatically and closed his eyes, and that was the last time he ever opened them. We then, of course, took him upstairs, and as I said, he had a cardiac arrest and died on the table, so he never had any chance to be questioned and whatnot, which I think is probably the reason Ruby shot him, most likely. He said he shot him because out of sympathy for Mrs. Kennedy, but I think there's a great deal of evidence now that he was probably hired to shoot Oswald to shut him up, and that's exactly what he did. So anyway, that's what happened with President Kennedy and with Oswald. And at that point, what came up at that time was what brought this about, of course, in everybody's mind in the country. Was this Oswald, who was just a kind of an odd duck, to say the least,